There's been a very intense escalation in the Twitter versus Modi government showdown that's been festering for the last many weeks and months. If you can believe it, viewer, Union Law and IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, the man in charge of information technology in the country, the man who's been leading the crusade against Twitter for non-compliance of the new digital rules, earlier today came out to say that he had been blocked from accessing his own Twitter account for over an hour. So agitated was the minister that he put out a thread on the Coup app. The Coup is an Indian rival app to Twitter. On Coup, the IT minister expounded on how his account had been blocked by Twitter. Minister Prasad claimed that he was denied access to his own account for an hour and wasn't able to post anything. He had effectively been barred from using his Twitter account for an hour, he says. The union minister was locked out of his account for alleged infringement of the so-called US Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This usually kicks into effect if you tweet something that is copyright of someone else. The minister later took to Twitter and launched a scathing tirade on the social media platform. Minister Prasad said that Twitter doesn't stand for free speech and is only interested in running an agenda. But first, digest that, ladies and gentlemen. The Minister of IT, the man leading the fight against Twitter, was locked out of his account for an whole hour today.
Things have happened in the past, as detractors seem to be claiming. Then in that case, there is all the more reason to ensure that these companies comply with the IT rules that the government has put in place, because it is too much of unilateralism. It is going beyond the laws of the land, and that shouldn't be acceptable to anybody. Twitter does not have an option in this matter. They will have to comply with the laws of the land.
So it has happened to me as well. The platform is duty bound to raise copyright issues if it's flagged by the owners of that particular copyright or intellectual property right. This is an issue which I had raised too in the committee meeting where we were discussing intellectual property rights and copyright. That how can news channels flag something as a copyright issue when you yourself are a participant and you're sharing it on your pages? So this is not something that it is minister specific, and I do not know why minister is making this about the Twitter platform or the social media platform. These are issues that have been unaddressed by the Information Broadcasting Ministry, by the IT Ministry, and it is coming back to bite them.
Now, in the Modi Council of Ministers, Ravi Shankar Prasad is seen as the Senapati leading the charge against Twitter in this war over compliance and compliance with Indian laws. Now, Ravi Shankar Prasad spoke exclusively to India Today's Rahul Srivastav on this Twitter versus centre policy war just a few days ago. Here's what he told us.
We gave them the last goodwill gesture. Please do.
Comply.
Otherwise, it will have consequences. They said within a week we will do it. First, they appointed a lawyer as their officer grievance. You can't do. He has to employ.
They employed a lawyer who was employed with some other law firm.
Yes.
What is the current status? Have they complied with the final compliance officer?
They haven't. I believe they have sent some name. Still address, etc. is not there. My point is, yesterday, when they said within a week we will do it, they did not do so. And this is very important, Rahul. Rule 7 of the guideline, framed under Section 87 of the Act, having lawful enforceability, clearly says, if you do not follow these guidelines or the rules, then you will lose Section 79 status and other attendant penal law consequences.
That means you are not issuing any order.
No.
It is by default that since you don't comply, you lose that status.
The withdrawal or extinction of your status as an intermediary exemption becomes effective because of operation of law itself. From the government we have said, all right, we will give you 1 week more goodwill gesture. I acknowledge these platforms have empowered ordinary Indians. The point is, we are empowering the ordinary users of these platforms against misuse. We are out of it. Let me make it very clear. But the point again, I would revert a very simple, straight question. Why should you be reluctant to enforce a mechanism which is your user-centric?
What is your hunch? Why don't they do more?
Don't ask me, ask them. For instance, I don't wish to make any comment on the issue as to what is happening in Ghaziabad. The police is doing, others are doing. I will not be making any, except to give one example. As that particular offending tweet has even come on your channel or other channels, it is in public domain. It was, I would say, offensive. Are you not supposed to examine whether you should allow a...
Also a threat to public order.
Huh?
Also a threat to public order.
Absolutely. Apart from the fact that the color of communal angle was found to be completely incorrect in the prima facie investigation, you are giving an impression that we are having a system of checking whether this particular presentation is manipulated or not. Why you have double standards on that? These questions have to be asked. And let me say it very emphatically on Rahul's show, that we are proud of our democracy. We have a constitution which gives freedom of speech and expression. We have a robust judiciary. We have got a robust media. You are asking me all the questions. And ultimately accountable to the people of the country.
Now, on this entire raging Twitter versus Modi Mantri fire, Shashi Tharoor, Congress MP, also chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology, has now reacted to this entire Twitter blocking a minister controversy, saying that he will be seeking an explanation from Twitter India for the locking of the IT minister's accounts. Shashi Tharoor says that his own accounts similarly faced action in the same way in the past. We will also seek answers on the rules and procedures Twitter follows while operating in India, says Shashi Tharoor, while adding ammunition to the government's fire against Twitter. Shashi Tharoor has also said that getting a notice from a UK-based organization citing Twitter's role as a service provider under a US law points to the challenges of Twitter operations in India at this time. Now, bringing the focus back to Ravi Shankar Prasad's own Twitter account. He's followed by millions. He's the IT and law minister. He's the man who is the face of the government's fight against Twitter over non-compliance of Indian law. Now, why did Twitter apparently deny access to Ravi Shankar Prasad's account? First, he got a notice for violation of the quote-unquote US Digital Act. The notice was for content posted on his account. So it was regarding specific content that he had posted on his Twitter account. The notice was on alleged infringement of copyright. Very, very serious charge. But that's what led to this blocking apparently. Twitter will remove the identified material, which is what happens in such a situation. And the account is to be suspended for repeated infringement, is what they warn when they send that message to the operator of the account. In this case, it's Ravi Shankar Prasad. Now let's take a look at how this showdown between the centre and the Modi government has escalated over the last few days. 13th of June, compliance officer, which was mandatory under the new IT rules, was not appointed by Twitter before the required deadline. June 16th, the police filed an FIR against Twitter over a Ghaziabad assault video which had not been marked as manipulated, even though the UP police had said it was being projected in a false and misleading manner on Twitter. On June the 18th, the police sent a notice to Twitter India over the Ghaziabad assault video and the alleged fake news. June 25th, Twitter blocks the IT minister's account for an hour for alleged infringement of the US Digital Act. So this is a face-off that has been escalating in a pretty consistent manner. Joining me live here on 5 Live, Prasanto Kumar Roy is a well-known tech policy expert. Niti Jain, spokesperson for the BJP. Niti Jain, coming quickly to you first. This was a bolt from the blue. The IT minister himself on the Coup app. On the Coup app, he broke this news about his Twitter account being blocked to him. He didn't have access to it. What is the government? I know you don't speak for the government, but what is your understanding of what happened here? Do you think this is linked to the ongoing face-off between Twitter and the government, or do you think that this was about some kind of specific rule that had been infringed by the minister?
I think it's too weird to just be a coincidence, Shiv. If you look at it, Twitter has been on a confrontational way with the Indian government for a really long time now. So to just look at this in isolation and as a coincidence is taking it a little far-stretched. That said, Twitter has not been following the Indian laws. And like you just said, Ravi Shankar Prasad ji has been leading this front with Twitter for a very long time. So this could be related. But the idea being that Twitter has taken an agenda, not just in India, even in the US, we looked at during their elections.
Yeah.
They have an agenda that they're trying to play out with. And we need to be proud that as a country, we're standing up to an organization that is hell-bent on not following the rules and laws of the country that they're operating in. They're getting their profits from, a huge amount of their profits from. And they have the audacity to block the account of the IT minister. I think that is huge. That is something that cannot be taken lightly at all.
Okay. Prasanto, what do you think happened here? You know, we're still to get any kind of clarity from Twitter's side, but you know, this is high-profile stuff. This is as high as it goes. I mean, after Ravi Shankar Prasad, it's probably only, you know, Amit Shah and Prime Minister Modi's accounts that could possibly be touched in this manner, which would lead to a story of this kind. But this is the IT minister, the BJP, both the panelists here on the show, as well as others, Amit Malviya and others, have said pretty much the same thing, that there are no coincidences, and they see this action by Twitter as part of the larger confrontation that is on between the company and the government. Prasanto, what do you think?
Look, I think Twitter is facing an existential threat in India. I don't think they would do something to deliberately throw themselves over the edge. I have been blocked under the Digital Millennium Act, as have tens of thousands of people. Okay, it's not a willful violation. I shared a video in which there was some background music playing. That background music apparently drew a copyright strike. I believe there is calibrated overreaction happening here. You have to look at the fact that they blocked and then permanently banned the US president, who was the president at that time. Okay, if they wanted to take serious action, they could completely. I think the mistake they have made is not giving special treatment to the minister, as well as to the BJP handles earlier, which have been marked manipulated media. I think that has been a very significant reason for both the police action and the government reaction and overreaction.
Interesting.
So I would not.
Yes. Finish your point, Prasanto.
So I would not put it down to, you know, a conspiracy or anything like that. You know, I have gotten very irritated at my tweets being suspended because there were 2 tweets which were suspended. I think they should figure out a way to handle that. But really, tens of thousands of tweets are taken down on a maybe monthly basis for the digital copyright millennium strike. And they have a SOP for that, you know, strike 1, strike 2, 3 strikes in and out, etc. And they should fix that. But I don't think this is action which is aimed at India.
Interesting and fair point. Niti, you know, tempers have been running high in this Twitter versus government confrontation. So it's, it's perhaps understandable that the BJP and the government are tempted to see it as part of that crossfire that, you know, Twitter has perhaps sort of taken a panga or taken a pot shot at the government in this manner. But what about Prasanto's view that maybe this just means that Twitter doesn't, you know, extend any special treatment, like Prasanto says, and I myself know many people who've gotten similar notices of this kind, that this is simply just, you know, part of what Twitter does for any kind of infringement in this manner, and there was no special sort of courtesy extended to the minister. Is that a possibility?
You can give them the benefit of doubt if you really want to, but the point is...
No, I'm just asking what you think. We don't know yet what the reality is.
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking generally.
Yes.
One can give them the benefit of doubt. But the problem is when Twitter comes up and takes action against the US riots that happened and does nothing when it happens in India, we know there is something there, right? It is not just coincidentally all of these things are happening. They have taken a confrontational way in India. This may or may not be related to that. Fine, you're saying let us wait for Twitter's statement or whatever. But the point is that all of those things, one thing cannot be looked in isolation. They need to come out. They're not cooperating with the Ghaziabad case. They're not cooperating with the IT laws, for heaven's sake. I mean, just to give them the benefit of doubt, it's a far stretch. If you just really want to take their side,
I understand what you're
as
saying.
it may.
I actually think that's a fair point as well, because I mean it's understandable that one would interpret it like that. Prasanto, could you blame the BJP though, because this has been an escalating sort of war of defiance. You've got the government already perceiving Twitter to be defiant, being stubborn, being extremely selective as far as this whole manipulated media issue is concerned. So, already everyone's blood is up in this government as far as Twitter is concerned. And therefore, it's going to be very difficult to look at it objectively as some kind of a digital copyright strike.
So I agree that, I think if you look at the point that as far as the IT rules compliance is concerned, Twitter should have actually complied and, then challenge the rules like others are, like WhatsApp is doing, etc.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a reason to question as to why they didn't comply. And I don't think they've come up with a very clear explanation on that. But I think they're under a lot of pressure at this point. And by the way, I mean, my tweet was suspended for 24 hours, my account. This has been handled in an hour. So there is actually special treatment. I think the mistake they made was not putting this bunch of handles for extremely special treatment. That's all I would put it down to. And I really think they should up their compliance very, very fast and then challenge it in court. I think there is many grounds for challenging the IT rules in court.
Well, let's actually see how this...
ahead and blocked the Venkaiah Naiduji's account as well. So they are giving a special treatment in the reverse order is all I can say.
Okay, we'll have to see what Twitter says in explanation. The only analogy that comes to mind, Prasanto and Niti, and I wonder if you'll agree with me, is just a few months ago you had the Indian and the Chinese armies just a few meters away from each other in one point of Ladakh. And I remember the perception was that if one person fires a bullet even by mistake, it's going to be interpreted as an act of war. And one wonders if we're seeing something like that happen here. Something that was maybe due process applied and not nullified is going to be interpreted as an assault. We don't know that yet, Niti. I'm not making a judgment. We don't know that yet. We'll have to see what Twitter says. But all I'm saying is that everybody's blood is so up right now. The smallest, even if it's an innocuous move, is going to be seen as possibly aggressive. So let's see where the dust settles on this one. Thanks, Niti and Prasanto, for joining me on that very quick chat on the IT minister being blocked for a whole hour by Twitter. It doesn't get bigger than that. The other side, the big, massive face-off between the Aam Aadmi